Most people believe their lives are shaped by the big, obvious decisions, the job they accept, the city they move to, the relationship they choose, the moment they finally decide to change direction, but life rarely transforms in those dramatic turning points we imagine. Instead, it shifts quietly, almost invisibly, through small, seemingly harmless choices that feel insignificant at the time. The opportunity postponed because it feels uncomfortable, the risk avoided because stability feels safer, the skill not learned because there's always time later, the difficult conversation delayed because staying silent feels easier. And in those moments, nothing appears to change, nothing breaks, nothing collapses, nothing signals that a future has just moved slightly out of reach, yet something has shifted, because every decision, even the smallest one, carries a hidden cost that reveals itself only through time. And the truth is that we rarely pay for our choices immediately. We pay for them slowly, later, through doors that never open, through paths that quietly disappear, through futures that never become available. Saying yes to comfort today often means saying no to freedom tomorrow. Choosing certainty now can mean limiting growth later. Avoiding risk may protect you in the present, but can trap you inside a narrower life in the future. And what makes this dangerous is that the cost rarely arrives as punishment. It arrives as normality, as a life that feels fine but never expands, as a routine that feels stable but never evolves, as a version of reality where nothing is obviously wrong, yet something essential is quietly missing. Years pass, and everything appears acceptable. Yet, invisible options have vanished. Momentum was never built. Adaptability slowly faded. And one day, the difference becomes visible, not between success and failure, but between what is and what could have been. Because the real tragedy is not losing, it is never discovering the alternative life that a different decision might have created. Every ignored opportunity compounds. Every delayed action accumulates. Every avoided challenge narrows the range of futures that remain accessible. Time transforms small decisions into permanent consequences, and what once felt like a minor moment quietly becomes a defining direction. The extra hour spent learning or wasted in distraction, the conversation pursued or avoided, the risk taken or dismissed, none of these feel life-changing in isolation. Yet together they construct the architecture of your future. Wealth, freedom, stability, and even regret rarely appear overnight. They emerge from patterns of choice repeated so consistently that they eventually become identity. The person who repeatedly chooses growth becomes adaptable. The one who repeatedly chooses ease becomes dependent on comfort. And this is the hidden mathematics of life. Every choice trades one future for another. Saying yes to one path always means saying no to countless others. And while we focus on what we gain, we rarely notice what we silently give up. The job that feels safe may cost you creativity. The routine that feels stable may cost you opportunity. The delay that feels harmless may cost you timing. And timing, more than talent or luck, shapes outcomes, because the world rewards those who act before certainty appears. Waiting for clarity often means arriving after the moment has passed. And so the price of hesitation is rarely visible until it becomes irreversible. The skill not learned becomes the promotion not earned. The risk not taken becomes the independence never achieved. The idea not pursued becomes the life never lived. And yet, just as small decisions can quietly limit us, they can also liberate us. Because choosing discomfort today can create freedom tomorrow. Choosing effort today can create ease later. Choosing uncertainty today can create possibility in the future. This is where true power lies, not in controlling outcomes, but in recognizing that every present choice is a negotiation with your future self. You are constantly deciding which version of your life gets to exist. The disciplined decision competes with the convenient one. The long-term vision competes with short-term relief, and whichever wins repeatedly becomes destiny. Most people do not drift into the wrong life because of one catastrophic mistake. They drift because of thousands of tiny decisions that all pointed in the same direction. And the scariest part is that drift feels comfortable while it is happening. Only later does it reveal its cost, because the future does not arrive as a surprise. It arrives as the accumulated result of what once felt optional. By the time we notice, flexibility has already been exchanged for predictability, ambition softened by routine, possibility replaced by familiarity. But awareness changes everything, because once you understand that every small decision carries weight, you begin to see choices differently, not as isolated moments, but as building blocks. The question stops being, "What do I feel like doing now?" and becomes, "Which future does this decision support?" And when you begin to ask that, life stops being something that happens to you and becomes something shaped by you. The cost of choices is unavoidable. The only question is whether you pay now through effort, risk, and discomfort, or later through limitation, missed opportunity, and regret. Every path has a price, every comfort has a cost, every delay compounds. And whether that price becomes freedom or restriction depends not on a single dramatic turning point, but on the quiet, repeated decisions made when no one is watching and nothing feels urgent. Because those moments are where the future is truly decided. The hour you spend improving instead of postponing, the step you take despite uncertainty, and the choice to move forward even when progress feels invisible. These are the silent negotiations that determine the range of lives available to you. Over time, these negotiations accumulate, shaping your trajectory, defining your resilience, influencing your capacity to adapt. And the remarkable thing is that the difference between two lives often begins with decisions that felt equally reasonable at the time. The person who chose to act when it felt inconvenient, and the one who chose to wait when it felt justified, may stand years later in entirely different realities, one shaped by momentum, the other by hesitation, one expanded by risk, the other constrained by safety. And neither outcome appeared inevitable at the beginning, because destiny rarely announces itself. It emerges gradually from preference. The preference for comfort over growth, for certainty over possibility, for familiarity over change. Yet every preference compounds into direction, and every direction compounds into outcome, which is why the smallest choices matter more than they appear. They do not simply fill time, they shape capability. They influence confidence, they determine readiness, and readiness determines whether opportunity becomes transformation or passes unnoticed. The opportunity you are prepared for becomes progress, the one you are unprepared for becomes regret, and preparation itself is the result of past decisions that once seemed trivial, the book read instead of ignored, the skill practiced instead of postponed, the conversation pursued instead of avoided. These are the investments that expand future possibilities. Without them, opportunity arrives as pressure rather than potential, and so the price of inaction is rarely visible until action is required. The moment arrives, and the version of you capable of responding does not yet exist. But the inverse is also true. The investment made quietly becomes the freedom experienced later. The discipline practiced privately becomes the confidence displayed publicly. The courage exercised once becomes the adaptability relied upon repeatedly. And over time, these patterns redefine what feels normal. Growth becomes comfortable, risk becomes manageable, uncertainty becomes navigable, and life expands not because of luck, but because of accumulated readiness. This is the paradox of choice. What feels harder now often becomes easier later, while what feels easier now often becomes harder later. The comfortable delay compounds into constraint. The difficult step compounds into possibility. And the longer these patterns continue, the more pronounced their effects become. Because time magnifies direction. It does not create outcomes from nothing, it amplifies what already exists. Small discipline becomes stability, small hesitation becomes limitation, and eventually the difference becomes unmistakable, not as a dramatic collapse or triumph, but as the quiet realization that one life contains more options than another, more mobility, more flexibility, more autonomy, and that difference was built gradually through choices that once felt inconsequential. And this is why understanding the cost of choices changes how we live. It shifts our focus from immediate comfort to long-term capacity, from temporary relief to enduring possibility. Because once you recognize that every decision carries a future implication, you begin to value effort differently. Discomfort becomes investment rather than burden. Uncertainty becomes gateway rather than threat. And the future transforms from something unpredictable into something influenced, not controlled, but shaped. And shaping begins with awareness. Awareness that every path has a price, every moment carries direction, and every small choice contributes to the life that eventually feels inevitable, because in the end, success is rarely a single achievement. It is the cumulative result of decisions made long before the outcome was visible, and limitation is rarely a sudden failure. It is the cumulative result of decisions that once felt harmless. And between those two realities lies the same force: choice, quiet, constant, and always carrying a cost.